what is the single hardest level in classic Tomb Raider? Ask 5 different fans and you'll likely get 5 different answers. What I will aim to be doing in this video is not merely ranking on frustration, but also on other aspects such as design-based difficulty. Before going into some of my favourite examples, we must first define what actually makes a level difficult. For this, I will be using these core difficulty factors to determine just how difficult a single level is. They are as follows: navigation and level layout, and this includes platforming precision. The next factor is traps and instant death, and finally the psychological difficulty. This being things like the level's overall atmosphere, isolation, and even just how frustrating this level can be to complete. Each of these factors will get a score out of 10, and then each of the scores will be combined together to give a total final level difficulty ranking. It is also important to note that due to the difficulty evolution across Tomb Raider 1 to 3, that more of the harder levels are in Tomb Raider 3. With Tomb Raider 1 being slower and more methodical, Tomb Raider 2 more combat heavy, and then Tomb Raider 3 which has less visual clarity, more punishing traps, and aggressively hostile design. And because we can immediately throw out the obviously easy levels, such as Tomb Raider 1's Caves, or Tomb Raider 2's Home Sweet Home, Tomb Raider 3's Meteorite Cavern, I will completely discard these immediately from the analysis and only focus on the levels that I think are the top 7 most difficult throughout Tomb Raider 1, 2 and 3 anyway. Please note the order that the levels are analysed in this video are in no particular order, and the winner of the most difficult level will be shown at the end. So with all that out the way, let the analysis begin. The first level I'm going to cover is Tomb Raider 3's Madubu Gorge. So this is one of those levels where the game immediately tells you you are not in control here. Instead of careful platforming or exploration, you're thrown into a kayak and told to survive. This level takes place in the dense narrow jungle in the South Pacific Islands with fast moving rapids, tight rock walls and very little room to breathe. This level appears in the middle of the game completely out of nowhere, which makes it even more brutal. Madubu Gorge is infamous because it forces you to master the kayak's controls, which are awkward, slippery and unforgiving. One mistake usually means instant death, and the level gives you almost no safe space to learn. A memorable moment on this level for me is when you finally do survive a long stretch of rapids only to die to a hidden spike trap around the corner that would spring from the water, and also being burnt to a crisp unexpectedly when on the hanging section of this level. In terms of the difficulty factors, first of all we will touch upon the navigation and level layout. For this, I've given it a difficulty of around 6.5 out of 10. The reason for this is because yes, the level is basically navigation under pressure, and you are constantly steering the kayak through narrow paths, sharp turns and sudden drops. Especially in the older games, the camera doesn't help, and sometimes you don't even know what direction you're supposed to go until it's too late. However, the reason I didn't rate this any higher in terms of difficulty is because overall the level is quite linear. You step onto the kayak, you go down the path, following the river until you eventually reach the end. In terms of actually knowing where to go over a long period of time, it is quite simple. Next, we are rating the traps and instant death. For this level, I've given it a strong 9 out of 10. This is where Madubu Gorge is absolutely ruthless. Spikes, waterfalls, them saws that go left to right, most mistakes kill you instantly. There's very little warning and deaths often feel sudden rather than deserved. Trial and error is basically required here. The next rating is the psychological difficulty, and for this one it's got to be a strong 8 out of 10. The constant motion, learning the controls, restarting the level over and over is completely exhausting. You're always bracing for the next obstacle, and there's no calm moment to reset. Combine that with the repeated deaths and the level becomes mentally draining very fast. The kayak controls alone add stress because you never fully trust them, and let's be honest, you definitely never will. So overall, is the level of Madubu Gorge cruel or just fair? And honestly, Madubu Gorge I think leans more toward cruel. It's memorable and intense, but it doesn't teach you gently, and it punishes mistakes way harder than it needs to. It's effective, but not very forgiving. For these reasons, Madubu Gorge gets a combined difficulty rating 23.5 out of 30. Up next is Tomb Raider 2's Temple of Xian. Now this is a level that feels like a final exam. It's the game throwing everything it's taught you up until this point straight back at you. Except now, the punishment for messing up is way harsher. This level is set inside an ancient Chinese temple filled with lava pits, massive vertical rooms, hidden switches and deadly traps pretty much everywhere you look. This is one of the final levels of Tomb Raider 2, which means it's designed to push you to your absolute limit. By this point, the game expects you to fully understand how Tomb Raider works. This level gets a place on the list because it's infamous on how much it demands precision. The jumps are tighter, the traps are nastier, and the margin for error is tiny. It isn't chaotic as such, but controlled, and absolutely brutal. The moments of this level that stick out for me are the endless trap rooms that's almost more akin to a gauntlet, where you just have to keep on running. Every room is timed, and you only have a few seconds to figure out what to do in order to move on to the next part of the level. That, and of course the wholly unique spider section, where some of the massive spiders can be seen, and this is the only time they are presented to you in the game. In terms of the navigation and level layout difficulty factor, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. The layout is complex and vertical, with lots of backtracking and interconnected rooms. You often have to remember where something was earlier and return later, sometimes from a completely different angle. But with that said, it's not confusing in a messy way, it's confusing deliberately, because it expects good memory and spatial awareness. Up next we have the traps and instant death factor, which I would also give a 7 out of 10. It is true this level loves instant death. Lava, spike pits, collapsing floors. If you misjudge a jump, you're done. A lot of traps are readable, but they still demand near perfect timing and positioning. You do usually know why you died, which helps. That doesn't make it any less punishing. The reason I didn't score this any higher was because you actually get the feeling of when you're going to enter a trap room, when there's a gauntlet approaching. That gives you time to prepare, save, in case you do die, you can quickly reload and attempt the trap again. Finally is the psychological difficulty, which I have given a 7 out of 10. The pressure here comes from knowing you're so close to the end, almost completed the game. You slow down, overthink jumps, and start second guessing yourself everywhere. There's also a constant tension because progress is slow, typically from dying and retrying certain rooms, and one mistake can wipe out several minutes of careful play. That, and also a few points added on, for the spider room of course. It goes without saying, the Temple of Xian is for sure a tough level, but it's mostly fair. It punishes mistakes hard, but it usually gives you the information you need. It's less about surprise and more about execution, which makes it brutal, but respectable. Tallying up each difficulty factor, this gives Temple of Xian a total rating of 21 out of 30. Up next, we have Tomb Raider 3's Aldwych. Now this certainly is a level that doesn't rush you. It slowly wears you down. Instead of fast deaths and chaos, the difficulty comes from being lost, confused, and never quite sure if you're making any progress. This level takes place in an abandoned London Underground station, with sealed platforms, flooded tunnels, service corridors, and hidden side rooms branching off everywhere. Oh, and the train, which you will see frequently, trying to run you down. This level, along with all of the London levels, represents a large difficulty spike. This level is known because it's basically a rat maze. Corridors loop back on themselves, rooms look similar, and it's very easy to lose your sense of direction. You can spend ages wandering around and still feel like you're getting nowhere. One thing I'll always remember about this level is the constant looping. The moment you realise you've looped back to the same platform again is both funny and painful. And those long silent stretches where nothing happens except getting lost and trying to figure out what to do next really stick with you. In terms of scoring, starting off with navigation and level layout, I would give this a difficulty factor of 9 out of 10. Aldwich's layout is its biggest weapon. It's cramped, layered, and full of side paths that lead to switches you won't understand until much later. The station is split across multiple floors, flooded areas, locked sections, which make mental mapping really hard. Even when you know what you're doing, it is still very easy to get lost. For the traps and instant death difficulty factor, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. Enemies, traps and instant death aren't too common on this level. The two main ones being the train of course, and the rotating drill, which you must quickly avoid in order to progress through the level. But other than these two things, which are pretty cool in themselves, there really isn't that much in terms of combat and overall fighting or traps. Finally, on the psychological difficulty factor, I'm giving this one a 9 out of 10. This is where Aldwych really shines, or should I say suffers, depending on how you see it. The darkness is oppressive and you're constantly straining to see what's ahead. Combined with the maze-like design, it creates a low-level anxiety that never really goes away. It wears you out, makes you tired, and heavily frustrated, and that mental fatigue builds up fast. Aldwych as a whole is mostly fair, but it's intentionally exhausting. The game isn't trying to kill you as such, or quickly, it's trying to grind you down. That makes it, I think, one of the most mentally demanding levels in the series. The level of Aldwych gets a combined difficulty factor of 22 out of 30. Up next is Tomb Raider 1's Atlantis. Now this level feels like the game taking its gloves off. Up until now, Tomb Raider has been tense and slow, but this level suddenly becomes aggressive. You're under constant pressure and the game really wants you to earn the ending. The level is set inside the organic, fleshy ruins of Atlantis, with strange structures, narrow walkways, and a massive pyramid rising up through the middle of the area. This is the second last level in Tomb Raider, right before the finale, so it's designed to test everything you've learnt. This level is infamous because of how many tough Atlantean enemies it throws at you. These aren't standard enemies, they hit hard, soak up damage, and show up again and again, often in awkward spaces. They are, to be honest, completely relentless. One thing I will always remember about this level specifically is, of course, Doppelganger or Bacon Lara, the copycat seen the only time in this room. It's unique and cool to see something as strange as this happening so late in the game. In terms of the difficulty factors, starting off with navigation and level layout, I'm going to give this a 4 out of 10. The layout itself isn't overly confusing, but the scale makes it tough. The long climb up the pyramid is a real endurance test, with narrow ledges and drops that punish sloppy movement. It's less about getting lost and more about staying focused for a long stretch without messing up. In terms of traps and instant death, I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. There are plenty of moments on this level where one wrong step means falling a long way down. Combined with the relentless onslaught of enemies attacking you both mid-climb and as you navigate room to room, deaths can feel sudden and frustrating. The danger often comes from being knocked off when you are in the central pyramid areas, rather than walking into a trap, although they are also abundant on this level too. And for the psychological difficulty, I will give this one an 8 out of 10. The constant combat pressure really wears you down. Knowing there's probably another Atlantean around the corner keeps you tense, especially as your resources start to run low. The pyramid climb adds to this. It's long, slow and exhausting, and dying near the top hurts way more than it should. Atlantis is tough, but it's mostly fair. It doesn't rely on cheap surprises, it relies on pressure. Constant, unrelenting pressure. It's difficult because it asks you to stay sharp for a long time, not because it's trying to trick you. Adding up all these difficulty factors, we get a score 20 out of 30. Up next we have Tomb Raider 2's Opera House. Now this is one of those levels that feels overwhelming the first time through. Not because it's fast or chaotic, although some bits are, but because it's big, dark, and refuses to guide you in any clear direction. This level takes place inside an abandoned opera house with backstage areas, high catwalks, ventilation shafts, and massive open rooms stacked on top of each other. Opera House appears early on in Tomb Raider 2, which makes its difficulty stand out even more, because you're still getting comfortable with the game when it suddenly opens up like this. This level is known for how confusing it can be. It's very non-linear, with lots of different routes, switches and vertical spaces. It's easy to wander around for ages and feel like you're missing something obvious. The main moment that sticks out for me on this level is of course the collapsible platform sequence, where you must run over the roof of the Opera House. All of the platforms collapsing beneath you, and you must get to the other side quickly before Lara plunges to her death. In terms of the navigation and layout difficulty factor, I am giving this one a 9 out of 10. Navigation is the real challenge on this level. It doesn't funnel you forward, it just spreads you out all over the Opera House. You're constantly climbing, dropping down, and circling back to areas you've already seen. Because many rooms look similar and the lighting is low, it's easy to lose track of where you are, and where you're supposed to go next. In terms of traps and instant death, I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10, because there really isn't that much. There is the collapsible sequence, yes, and then there are the falling objects from the roof when you were inside the Opera House, paired with a few bits of glass and fans that if you go into you die immediately. These, however, aren't such a big problem on this level, and the traps and instant death aren't really the big focus or even what makes this level challenging at all. And then finally, for the psychological difficulty factor, I am giving this a score 7 out of 10. The darkness and silence do most of the work here. The atmosphere is creepy, but you never feel fully safe. On top of that, there are a lot of enemies early on, often placed to catch you off guard while you're trying to navigate. That constant tension makes even simple movement feel stressful. Overall, Opera House is a tough but fair level. It doesn't try to kill you cheaply, other than the few objects falling from the roof. It overall challenges your awareness and patience. The difficulty comes from scale, darkness and confusion, rather than outright cruelty. With all the factor scores added up, Opera House gets a score of 19 out of 30. Up next we have Tomb Raider 3's Lost City of Tinnos. This feels like Tomb Raider 3 at its most aggressive. This is the point where the game stops holding back, as if it was before this point, and starts actively trying to overwhelm you. The level is set in ruins of an ancient city, filled with strange architecture, tight corridors, open courtyards, and plenty of places for enemies to ambush you. This level appears late in the game, just before the finale, so it's clearly designed as a stress test for the player. I don't think I'm alone when I say this, as a memorable moment is the constant supply of them strange flying creatures. They seem to come endlessly, constantly on your tail, trying to kill you. In terms of the navigation and level layout difficulty factor, I am giving this one an 8.5 out of 10. The layout is completely confusing without being totally unreadable. There are lots of similar looking rooms and branching paths, and it's easy to lose track of which areas you've already cleared. Progress often means activating switches scattered across the level, which forces you to backtrack while dealing with enemies. And some of the puzzles on this level are completely navigation based, such as the maze and switch puzzle. In terms of the traps and instant death difficulty, this one gets a high score of 9 out of 10. You see, Lost City of Tinnos is basically a giant gauntlet. It's filled with traps, unrelenting enemies, and other hazards that can kill you instantly if you're not careful. The problem is that some of these dangers feel like they come out of nowhere, which makes death feel harsh, even when you're not playing cautiously. And let's not forget that entire section where your screen is just constantly shaking. And finally, for the psychological difficulty factor, I'm also going to give this a score 9 out of 10. Mentally, this level is exhausting. You're constantly on edge, low on resources, and expecting another enemy or trap around every corner. There's very little downtime, and that constant pressure wears you down quickly. So, is Lost City of Tinnos fair or just cruel? And in my opinion, it sits right on the line. Some of its difficulty does feel earned, but other moments cross into cruelty. It's effective at creating urgency and tension, but it definitely tests your patience. With all of these scores added together, that gives Lost City of Tinnos a 26.5 out of 30. Up next we have Tomb Raider 1's Natla's Mines. Now this is a level that completely flips Tomb Raider on its head. Just when you're comfortable, the game takes away all of your guns and drops you into a hostile space where survival suddenly feels way harder. The level is set in a sprawling underground mining complex with conveyor belts, lava pits, industrial machinery and long vertical shafts. Natla's Mines appears late in Tomb Raider, right after a major story moment, but before the actual climax, which makes the difficulty spike feel sudden and brutal. This level is known for the simple fact that it is the first one of all Tomb Raider games where you lose all of your weapons at the start. That one change completely alters how you approach everything, and instantly makes every enemy you encounter a new type of challenge. And of course, on this level, how can we forget Skater Boy, the best addition in the whole of the Tomb Raider 1 game. In terms of the navigation and level layout difficulty factor, I am going to give this one a 7 out of 10. The level starts off pretty non-linear, but once you pass the first section, it then becomes pretty much a straight path to the end of the level. What does make this level hard and confusing overall is its design and aesthetic. Grey caves make it seem like every room you've been in is similar to the one before, and in that essence it can be easy to get lost. Next, for the traps and instant death, this one gets a score of 4 out of 10. There isn't really many things that kill you instantly here. There are a few rooms where boulders will roll at you and may take you by surprise for that first time. There is very few enemies on this level, therefore combat isn't too much of an issue. That is once you manage to get your guns, and the lava puzzles and platforming are things you can see coming and know that if you do make a misstep, it's entirely your fault and will probably be able to correct it on your next go. In terms of the psychological difficulty factor, I will also give this a 7 out of 10. Yes, losing your guns is stressful at the start, but it is something you do get used to, and the minimal enemies means that you can often skip and run past them whilst taking minimal damage. The main factor in terms of the psychological difficulty is by the aesthetic of the level. Dark, claustrophobic, and stuck in a cave. Or a mine in this instance. And as I say, a lot of the areas do look similar, which can be frustrating on your first or second time round. So Natla's Mines, is it fair or cruel? In my opinion, it is harsh, but smart. Taking your weapons away is cruel in the moment, but it forces you to think differently. It's tough, but it certainly earns it. Overall, Natla's Mines gets a difficulty score of 18 out of 30. So the results are in, and it is now time to see which is the most difficult level from Tomb Raider 1 to 3. In 7th place we have Natla's Mines, scoring 18 out of 30. A sharp difficulty spike thanks to losing your weapons, but the layout is readable and the challenge is more about tension than outright cruelty. In at number 6 we have Opera House with 19 out of 30. Non-linear and dark with lots of enemies, but it's more confusing than punishing once you understand the layout. Tied for 4th and 5th we have Atlantis and Temple of Xian. Atlantis for its relentless Atlantean enemies, and the exhausting pyramid climb creates sustained pressure rather than sudden unfair difficulty, with Temple of Xian demanding precision platforming and lethal traps, which makes it difficult, but it remains structured and mostly fair. In at number 3, scoring 22 out of 30, we have Aldwych. Maze-like design and oppressive darkness make it mentally draining and easy to get lost, even without constant and instant deaths. In at number 2, we have Madubu Gorge, which scores 23.5 out of 30. The kayak sections combined brutal navigation, constant instant death, and non-stop stress into one of the most punishing experiences in the series. And finally, the winner as the most difficult level from Tomb Raider 1 to 3 was Lost City of Tinnos, with a score of 26.5 out of 30. Relentless enemies, lethal traps, confusing navigation, and zero breathing room make it the most consistently hostile level overall. So, there you have it. The most difficult level from Tomb Raider 1 to 3, based off these score factors, is Lost City of Tinnos from Tomb Raider 3. Thank you so much for watching my video. Do you agree with me? Leave a comment down below whether you agree with this list or disagree with this list. As always, like, subscribe and hype up the video. Thanks to my members for your continued support. To all of you, thank you for watching.